Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, to be honest, being that I can't see anyone or having any idea what any of your expressions are. However, I guess I'll start at the beginning. Um, Seward Johnson, this is an image of him. He was born on April 16th, 1930 in New Jersey. He's the son of J. Seward Johnson Sr. and Ruth Dill. And the grandson of Robert Wood Johnson Sr., one of the founders of Johnson & Johnson. Let's see. This is a picture of Robert Wood Johnson Sr., the founder of Johnson & Johnson. And basically this entire presentation is talking about the Johnson family and how they have given back to the community, and that's been a main mission of theirs. So dating back to 1887, during the first year of the Johnson & Johnson company, they began to give back to the community by donating porous plaster to underserved citizens of New Brunswick. And that is something that's just continued since then. This is a picture of Seward as a young boy with his sisters, his mother, and his father. His father, Seward Johnson Sr., which you probably have seen much of his name while driving through the township or Princeton, going to the watershed. His father created 6 charitable foundations for each one of his children in 1963. One being the Atlantic Foundation, and that's the foundation that I will be talking most about today. Seward Johnson Sr. Was the head of the Atlantic Foundation. And when he created these foundations, he really hoped that it would instill in his children the obligation to make the world a better place. That with wealth, there is that obligation to make charitable endeavors. And so starting from that point, he created a foundation called the Harbor Ranch Oceanographic Institute. And he, as you can see, his name is on on the actual ship. He put together scientists, engineers, artists, and put all these people together to really do good work. At that point in time, that was 1970, at that point in time, most people were looking at space and looking at what was beyond our Earth. And he thought that it was super important to see what was here. And he believed in ecology. He believed in going as deep into our world to protect our world, but to also find potential for cancer treatments and whatnot. So the thing I really want you to think about and really take with you is that putting all these people together that were interested in one thing, funding that, and then sharing that with the world. There has been, the foundations have pursued many different aims over the decades. However, the thing that they always have in common is innovation, creativity, community, pushing boundaries, and helping people reach their absolute full potential. Let's see, next. Okay, so this is a painting that Seward Johnson, his son, and who most of you are familiar with, the artist and founder of Grounds for Sculpture. This is a painting that Seward created. Behind every great man, there's a great partner. And his great partner was Cecilia Joyce Horton. They met in Nantucket. Well, they met on their way to Nantucket. This painting is called Meeting in Nantucket. So Seward and Cecilia were both booked for the same flight to Nantucket, and they overbooked the flight. So Seward was not happy that a flight was overbooked. And he went up to the counter and he said, I'm going to call my attorneys. Like, this is ridiculous. Knowing that like there was a attractive woman that was standing there going through the same thing. And so he called his attorneys, and attorneys were like, well, there's nothing really you can do. Like, maybe ask them for a hotel room and a voucher for dinner. And he did just that. Another person that was also bumped from the flight was a plumber from California. So Seward convinced the plumber from California, who's never been in New York before, that it would be a really great, great opportunity for him to experience New York, allowing for him and Cecilia to have dinner together, which they did. So they were married in 1965, and I think 2015 was their 50th wedding anniversary. Cecilia Joyce Horton Johnson. This is pictures of Cecilia and Seward as a young couple. One of, of them as a young couple. Mrs. Johnson was born in Chestnut Hill. And after graduating from the Raven Hill Academy, she received an associate's degree in art history and a bachelor's degree in English literature from George Washington University. Based on her poems and short stories, she was accepted into graduate writing seminar at Johns Hopkins University and continued on to the New School in New York, where she studied directing. Cecilia loves the arts, and she steadily encouraged Seward, and ultimately she influenced Seward to also, not that he didn't love the arts before, but he really brought to the forefront his love of art and the arts in general. These are pictures of Cecilia, Seward, John, their son, and India, their daughter. So this was a pivotal moment in Seward's life, the birth of his children. At this point in his life, he didn't have a job. He was fired from the family company, and he was really looking for this deeper purpose in life. So he was painting, and he enjoyed painting, but it really didn't inspire him as much as he wanted it to. So one day, Cecilia was looking at his paintings, and she said to him, Seward, like, you are a fantastic artist and you have a mechanical mind. Have you ever thought of putting those two things together and thinking about sculpture? And he said no. And she took out an ad out of her pocket and she handed it to him, and it was for a sculpting class. So Seward took the sculpting class, and while he was taking the first sculpting class. Now, this was the first and only class that Seward took. He took the sculpting class, and he was sitting there listening to the lecturer. And at first, they took styrofoam, and he was able to carve with styrofoam. And he was super excited about it. His heart was racing. He knew it was like his calling. He just wanted to get to work. And then the professor started talking about theory, and Seward excused himself and he never went back. If you know Seward, that's very Seward of Seward. And so he was, at that point, he was denied entry into the Boston School of Fine Art. And he decided that he would create his own sculpture. So he bought some foam, he went into, he rented a space, and he started creating artwork. So one of the first pieces here you'll see is called Stainless Girl. And he made this piece, and he went to a foundry, And he told them he wanted this piece recreated in stainless steel. Stainless steel is a really hard medium to work with. But he said that he would like this piece made in stainless steel, high polished stainless steel, and he basically put it on the front door of the, he left his piece of artwork at the front door, and months later he picked up the piece, and the man who ran the foundry, his name was Joel Meisner, said that it was this fantastic piece, and he would really like to submit it in a competition, and he did, and it won an award. So this leads us to the Johnson Atelier. So Seward was completely excited about everything that just happened, and in 1974, he founded the Johnson Atelier Technical Institute of Sculpture. And it was to overcome two problems that artists usually saw. One, to allow artists to retain control of their artwork, and two, to give access to previously guarded information on production techniques. So he had this view: if he was going to make something, he wanted to be able to go into a foundry, work with artists that had the know-how, and create artwork and be part of that creative process. Where in traditional foundries, you would drop your artwork off and you'd leave and you'd come back and you'd pick it up. And he wanted something that was more of a whole experience and really to be part of that process. Thus, he made the Johnson Atelier Technical Institute. So at this point, he did exactly what his father did with Harbor Branch, and he took all of these really wonderfully intelligent people, artists, and put them in one location, and they all learned from each other and worked with one another. The difference is when you put a group of scientists together, they behave in one way, but when you put a group of artists together, perhaps they would behave in a different way. So the best way to explain the atelier at this time is that you had all of these great minds, but it was a little bit of chaos, merrymakers, a lot of people say, eccentric people living and working in one environment. The other thing that was important with the atelier is that many of the Johnson Atelier members would eventually leave and start their own companies. So start their own foundries, start their own installation companies. And that really speaks to the philosophy of people reaching their full potential. Not only was Seward doing this for himself, but he was doing this also for other artists and other people to be able to have an open source when that was not really a thing at that point. And it allowed him to encourage people to do something that they absolutely loved, and gave them the confidence to go out on their own and do it on their own. So, basically over the last 5 decades, many have started companies and nonprofits, and they're impacting the world and doing really wonderful things. So, there was people that were coming all over the country. There was people coming all over the world to study at the Johnson Atelier. And how it worked, like any traditional master studio, is that you have a master and you learn from that. So you'd have a main, like you'd have someone who was master, was master at modeling, and then he would teach students. So there was hundreds of apprentices that came through and worked at the atelier. So, if anybody is familiar with the campus in Hamilton, there are a few nonprofits that reside at that campus. One is the International Sculpture Center, one is Grounds for Sculpture, and one is the Seward Johnson Atelier. So in 19, I have to find my date. Let's see. In 1970s, the International Sculpture Center asked Seward if he would become the president of the new ISC board, and brought his experience to bear in incorporating organizing the board's operations. And at that point, there was a man who basically traveled across the country to come and speak to Seward to ask him if he could help out. The International Sculpture Center is an amazing organization who does these great conferences for artists and help artists create artwork, and also the publishers of Sculpture magazine. So, Grounds for Sculpture. So I don't know if any of you've been to the Seward Johnson Atelier or the Johnson Atelier. It is right on Sculptor's Way, next to the entrance to Grounds for Sculpture. And the reason for that is that the Johnson Atelier was there first. So you had all of these artists working together. Two artists that I'm going to speak about are Herk van Togeren, as well as Isaac Wicken, who would meet with Seward and have discussions about the future of the Atelier. Herk van Togeren was the director of the Atelier and really brought a ton of people into the Atelier. So at the Johnson Atelier, they were creating all this artwork, and in their backyard, they were just kind of putting artwork, and they started to have discussions on, well, we're making all this work, but there's no location for it to be seen. And it's really hard to have people, artists have places for large sculptures. So if any of you are familiar, the New Jersey State Fairgrounds was right behind the Johnson Atelier. And so Seward, at a lunch during some drinks with Herk and Isaac, thought maybe a sculpture park or maybe a place to put sculptures of our clients would be really interesting. The Lang Foundation then purchased the New Jersey State Fairgrounds. So out of that is what all of you know now to be Grounds for Sculpture. That is the birth of Grounds for Sculpture. Other organizations that were part of the Johnson Atelier was the Digital Stone Project, which the Digital Stone Project then became Antiquity Stone, where they would do carving from stone. And then another organization, the Digital Atelier, was part of the R&D department, and they created their foam sculptures. It's all digitally milled artwork, and these were all new technologies, just kind of pushing that barrier. What could happen next? How could we push this farther and better? Digital Atelier went out on their own and became a for-profit business. Recently, in the last year, the Seward Johnson Atelier acquired the Digital Atelier as a wholly owned subsidiary. So, Kim, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. That was a lot of information, and I'm going to move on.
Sure thing, Lynn. This is great. I know you're a little nervous because there's so many people. We have like over 70 some people here. No worries, I got your back. Dan wants to know, was the Atelier first located somewhere else, like Princeton Junction? Like, has it been in a number of places?
Yeah, so It has been a number of locations. At Farber Road, I think, or that might have been, but yeah, it was out in Princeton Junction area as well,
Okay.
off of Route
Wow.
1.
I know the feeling because the Pennington Public Library has been in many locations as well. So, Meredith wants to know if you know of any artists who have first started at the Atelier and now have branched out. Do we know any of these names? Any? Yeah,
Yeah,
let us
so
know.
um, the Hopewell Valley Arts Council, there's a few artists, Yuri Hollisey.
Oh yeah, Yuri.
He's an artist that was at the Atelier and kind of branched out on his own. Harry Gordon, Wendy Gordon, John Lash, um, Rory Mohan. Am I saying his last name right? I mean, there's so many. Andrew Patinsky, who
Oh,
he's a very well-known artist, especially in the Polish community. He just recently passed away, but he's an artist that came through the Atelier um, and was there up until October. Um, so I mean, there's hundreds of artists. I mean, I can't even go go through them. The original director at Grounds for Sculpture, Brooke Barry, she was also an artist, but also the founding director of Grounds for Sculpture. She originally worked at the Johnson Atelier as well.
now this is rather. I know this. We talked about this earlier, just as we were rehearsing. But there seems to be a very interesting relationship between the Atelier and Grounds for Sculpture.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can clarify or at least
I
maybe
can
elaborate a
try.
little bit.
Sure. So it actually, this is the next part I was going to talk about, and I know that it was going to get complicated, so I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a breath.
Sure.
So, Grounds for Sculpture was born out of this idea of at the Johnson Atelier. Um, so, the Atlantic Foundation owned the property as well, and the Sculpture Foundation owned, I'd say, 90% of the sculptures that were housed at Grounds for Sculpture. And in 2014, Seward, who he's the chairman of he was the chairman of the board of the Atlantic Foundation. Seward decided that, and the family decided to make a gift of sculpture to Grounds for Sculpture, not personally, but it was through the foundation. And so the foundation made a gift to Grounds for Sculpture of those 90% of the sculpture, as well as much of the land. It's something that's pretty remarkable, and what makes it unique and really generous is that it happened during Seward's lifetime. Usually that's something that would happen, post-mortem. But so in 2014, that gift was made. At that particular time, the Seward Johnson Atelier, everything was kind of reorganized, and the Seward Johnson Atelier kind of was born. And the Seward Johnson Atelier is the owner of copyright of all Seward's artwork, as well as, and has the ability to make Seward's artwork directed by Seward.
Okay.
So that's kind of, so we're all different organizations. So you have that International Sculpture Center that's on site, who Seward really helped organize. You have the Seward Johnson Atelier, where sculpture is made on site, and then also Grounds for Sculpture. That's all kind of in the same complex. It's a kind of complicated situation of whose property you're on, when you're on it. But there are three different organizations working together in harmony to bring this in overall complex. And also the Digital Atelier is there on site as well.
Okay.
So.
Wow. Well, I think you clarified more for me.
Great.
So we'll let you continue for now.
Yeah,
And I know
sure.
I see more questions, but I will
Okay.
hold them until after or whenever you want to take another break. All right.
Sure. Mhm. So to talk about Seward's artwork for a little bit, because I know that some of you were interested in learning more about him and his series and his artwork. As I said, Seward was a painter originally, and at Grounds for Sculpture in the gallery, And there are these amazing painted trays that I don't have any images of, but I highly recommend you come to the gallery and see them once the gallery is open post COVID. We're hoping that the gallery will be open in the spring. So the first series that he has is celebrating the familiar. These are hyper realistic bronze pieces. You know, there could be a whole nother talk just on the series alone, and the background on those, like the whole like the origin stories of each one of them, and how innovation moved from each one, with the different patinas and the paint and the hyper realistic paint and his entire process, which is pretty fascinating. I would absolutely suggest, when we're doing tours again, come tour the Seward Johnson Atelier, so you're able to understand the process a little bit more and really dig into deeper to what how these pieces are created and made. The second series is Beyond the Frame. These pieces are basically going beyond the frame. So you have artworks that were inspired by Impressionists or post-Impressionist masterworks, allowing visitors to step into an artwork. So you have what's in the actual frame of the original piece, like the painting, but then Seward takes it beyond the frame. So you're able to walk around the back of it and see the sides of it and look under the table. And there's like these beautiful little nuances with the relationships between the people. And that's another thing that I have to say across the board with all Seward's work. All his work has these really tiny moments, right? They are, you know, really capturing the mundane, everyday moments that sometimes we take for granted that are so important. Those small moments are more important, and we've learned this now more than ever, that those small moments are more important than those really big moments sometimes. So how someone's hands are placed, or the color of, you know, different colors of socks or hair growing on a woman's legs, or someone with a wedding band and someone not with a wedding band. All these tiny subtleties are in all his pieces. Icons Revisited. These are pieces that Seward would capture images that impacted over generations. So moments that had a lot of intensity, that anyone looking at it would know who the people are and know that moment. And points of departure. Every artist has, you know, different series, but these are moments that, or sculptures that kind of go beyond that, and really exploring them to the fullest degree. Sometimes they don't fit in nicely into a category. Some of these pieces are pieces that he did really early on, and then other pieces he did later, but he was just really exploring ideas he had. And then there's the monumental work. So if any of you have been to the train station in Hamilton, you would see that there's these monumental sculptures. They're all over the world. There are grounds for sculpture. They are, and even these are crossover different series, because they are monumental, but there's also sometimes life-size versions of them. So moving on to today. So Seward passed away in March of this year. I have to say that's probably one of the reasons I'm most nervous about talking today, is because this is the first time I've talked about him or the foundations or really his work publicly. And I mean, it's just sometimes really overwhelming. And but sustaining the family's legacy. His son, John S. Johnson, there was a few organizations, just like his grandfather, just like his father, he has created One is he's developed I-Beam, which is a cross between the Andy Warhol's factory and MIT Media Lab, which became a real haven for artists and that worked with technology. He created the Screenwriters Colony. It's a residency inspired incubator for emerging screenwriters based in Nantucket. Harmony Labs, whose mission is to create the world where media systems support healthy, democratic, cultural, and healthy, happy people. And then also he has the Harmony Hotel, who him and his wife have created. This is the only for-profit, and it is his wife Susan's also an artist, documentarian, and a naturist, and they own the Harmony Hotel in Costa Rica, and it's a 70% ecological self-sustaining business. India, Blake Johnson. This is Seward's daughter. So John kind of went the route of he's definitely creative in himself. However, he puts energy into foundations, putting a lot of really intelligent people together to gather information that perhaps the average person wouldn't be able to do, break it open and share it with the world. And India is an artist. India works in different mediums. She's done sculpture, she's done poetry, she has done photography, she has done pottery, clay, working with clay. And these are all, she's very artistic. This is one of the pieces, it's called Moodstone, and it was paired with her father's sculpture of a little girl kind of cubbied inside of that piece. In June, we will be having a joint show between Seward and India, and it's India's photographs that inspired trays that Seward painted in the gallery, and I'm really looking forward to that, to really juxtaposing those two pieces together, and so we're able to see them in one space. John and India both love the arts, and they created the Almanac Arts Colony, which it celebrates the excellent in arts by providing a quiet place as well, and insulation from the market for artists and art organizations. So it's a place for people to go, kind of escape all the noise and really focus on their work. And there's different, all different mediums as well in that. So the Seward Johnson Atelier today. So the Seward Johnson Atelier is where my office is, where I work. We create sculpture. We have a massive high bay where we have enough room to create monumental sculptures. We have a massive paint booth, so we're able to paint monumental sculptures. We do restorations and conservation and installations of artwork. And then there's also the opportunity to actually come to the atelier. And I highly recommend that, because coming to the atelier is pretty overwhelming and amazing. We have workshops. You'll see, this is a program that we did with Bear Tavern Elementary School, where students took this, it's called a scratch block. That's what they're pouring metal into right now. And they scratched into it and they pour metal into it. And then they get a tile at the end of the project. You can come and take tours through the atelier. I should probably say that we actually are doing another scratch block, a total virtual scratch block workshop in February. So if you're interested in that, definitely take a look at our website, or we're doing it in conjunction with Grounds for Sculpture, so you can find it on Grounds for Sculpture's website too. You can take a tour of our facility. We have adult workshops right now. They're a little bit limited because of COVID, but we definitely have stuff on the docket for 2021. We host school groups and community groups in the atelier, and we're willing to work with businesses and organizations to figure out what's a right fit. This is some of the scratch blocks you see. And then we also have demonstrations and technical talks that allow people and artists to find out more. We're also really interested in having artists come and work at the atelier, work with us, so they're able to create their own artwork. So that's it.
Thanks, Lynn, so much for
Sure.
providing this information. We have a lot of comments from people who had mentioned about their appreciation of Seward's work. I think that you mentioned Seward's trays,
Mhm.
and we also had a comment about his lovely trays. There was a question about whether or not India's upcoming show was planned before Seward passed.
It
This
was.
collaboration. Wow.
Yeah, so we started talking. Seward thought it was important. So with Seward's trays, they started out as he would call it his basket weaving, but he at night he had a hard time sleeping, so um, he would paint on trays, and he would like as a way to clear his mind, have a glass of vodka and, and paint on trays. And so he was creating all these trays, and one day me and a coworker went into a space of his, and there was just trays everywhere, like all up against the wall, and we were just like, why are they just why is there trays everywhere? So for safety purposes, we decided to hang them, and then once we hung them, um, so it was like, oh, like these trays are kind of interesting. and and he became more and more, especially as he got older, he became more and more engaged with these trays and painting on these trays. So a lot of times it's scenes from his Nantucket home, or his um, Key West home, or his Hopewell home. Most of you probably know that he's a resident of Hopewell, or he has a home in Hopewell. And it was like places that were important to him, grounds for sculpture. Um, and um, so then India, with her photographs, he would love his daughter's photographs, of course. And he started painting based on her, like inspired by her photographs. And so there was an exhibition of his trays and her photographs in Rome. However, they weren't this, one wasn't based on the other. It was just trays and photographs.
Yeah.
So it kind of we decided while he was still living, he really wanted to have an exhibition between the two of them, so they could see how they kind of were inspiring each other. The other thing I want to say about grounds for sculpture that I didn't say in my, talking a mile, super quick, was that, grounds for sculpture, I kind of washed over it as though it was something that just came out of the atelier, but it really is a passion of Seward's. Like he loved, he saw the founding and creating of grounds for sculpture as an art form in, himself. So it was a piece of artwork, like making decisions about where trees went, and he wasn't one to plant saplings. Like they'd have to bring in large trees, because he wanted to see what it would look like immediately. um, and the whole idea of all the arts, literature and poetry and theater and music and fine art, all kind of converging in one place, he was really in love with that idea.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, Carol had a question.
sure.
Um, all the work you see, and I'm assuming she means at the atelier and grounds for sculpture. I know you worked at grounds for sculpture before, so
Mhm.
hopefully you can speak to this as well.
I might.
Are all of these works from artists that have studied or worked at the atelier, or do they bring in artists from other
No.
areas?
So quite a bit of the artwork that's at grounds for sculpture are could have been artists that were at the atelier, especially when the collection was early on. However, now there's artists that come in from all over the world. exhibitions that happen all over the world and might not have had any connection to the Johnson Atelier. But that core collection, you had a lot of artists, so the foundation would purchase artwork with artists that were working at the atelier. I'm not necessarily working at the atelier, but working with the atelier. So there is a large percentage of, it runs the gamut at Grounds for Sculpture to emerging artists to really well-known artists like Magdalena Vikonovich to like an emerging artist who had sold their first piece. So it's everywhere in between.
Yeah, I know the last time I was at Grounds for Sculpture, that just the variety was great. And then having the workshop, I was there with a little cousin and there was a workshop, a sculpture workshop. And so just the hands-on nature of it was so much fun, such a great experience. I'm sure many of us have been to Grounds for Sculpture before. So Alan has a question.
Sure.
He went on a tour of the atelier several years ago. And he said the guide mentioned that some of the large pieces were cast in China to lower cost. Is this still the case?
Well, we're not really casting many pieces right now. We're kind of at an interesting point in our organization because of the passing of Seward. Not that we won't be casting any more pieces, but we kind of are just reevaluating everything. There were pieces cast in China. There's pieces that have been cast in Thailand. There's been and plenty of pieces that were cast here in the United States, but right now we're not really doing any casting.
Yeah. What do you, and I know you speak so fondly of Seward, Lynn. I know this must be hard for you. What do you see as his legacy? We have someone ask, and what do you see as this impact? Yeah, and his impact of his passing.
So his passing, his passing on me has been insanely impactful. He was a complicated person and a fun person and a quiet person. Like you can't say one thing about Seward. I think overall his legacy is to make a world a better place, like do good in the world, know what you have and try to share that with others. And take a moment to just kind of breathe and really focus on the things that are important, those small, quiet moments. The biggest thing that I think I got from him, or, like I learned from him, was take chances, be kind, but definitely take chances, like, I mean, his legacy to every individual person is going to be different. I had the honor of like writing something for the GFS volunteer members newsletter, and I was asked to write something, and when talking to the director of that at Grounds for Sculpture, we kind of came to the assumption that it would be great if we heard from many voices, because everybody's experience has been different. But I think that everybody feels like he really pushed boundaries. He made you push boundaries. He made you think differently. And he really wanted to see you succeed, and know that there was no limits, I guess.
Yeah, I get that sense. And just from that story you told about his painted trays, we have someone, actually, Meredith, asking if you have any other memories you'd like to share with Seward that you've had.
I have so many.
Yeah,
I don't really know. I don't really know where to start. I mean,
yeah, I bet
they're all, some of the most wonderful times is him like just walking in a room and seeing you and being so excited to see you. Like he would be like, Lynn, like, laughing, and he was masterful at ordering a bottle of wine. I don't know. There's so many.
Well, I have an anecdotal story that maybe, you can confirm because you knew him personally,
Mhm.
but I have two friends who a number of years ago, they were looking for a wedding venue and they went to the grounds for sculpture, and apparently they ran into Seward
Yep.
and he
Mhm.
happily led them back to apparently his studio. He had a room that was recreated to look like Van Gogh's bedroom.
Mhm. Yeah,
And so they told me this story, and I'm like, really? He really had that? Yeah, he really had Van Gogh's bedroom recreated.
he
Um,
does.
wow,
So, I mean, that was one of the so very classic sewer is that he would dine at Rats, and sometimes like if I was dining with him or we were dining, when I say we, I mean like other employees dining with him. Um, Sometimes like you'd see him and he would just kind of gloss over, and you knew that like he was going to get up and talk to like the 5 tables around us, and he'd be like, "I'm Seward Johnson," and like or like just go up and be like, "What do you think of grounds for sculpture?" without people even knowing. I mean, that was the great like a great thing is like he would just go up and talk to people, and sometimes people knew who he was and then sometimes they didn't know who he was, but it was pretty fantastic.
oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so
Um,
that story that you just told,
yeah.
I'm sure that that probably happened on the daily.
Wow, wow. It's because I felt like, oh, did they make this up?
Mm-mm.
So, well, thank you for confirming after all these
Yeah,
years.
and yes,
Alan,
up in his studio it's called Welcome Home, and it's um it's beyond the frame
yeah.
of Van Gogh's bedroom, and he would sleep in it. Like he would sleep in it. Things were functional. There's
Oh,
also a reproduction, like not reproduction, but another edition of that in the Johnson Gallery. So people can go
oh.
in once the Johnson Gallery is open and go in and experience that immersive experience in Van Gogh's bedroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I always that's what I love about grounds for sculpture is being in the painting and
Mhm.
being one of the subject matter. So Alan wrote, Seward was more accepting of varied forms and styles in the grounds than most other sculpture displays in our country. His studio on the grounds reflected his informal and welcoming style. So I think our story sort of exemplified that.
Yeah.
Carol has a question. So are you still acquiring art? Carol's noticed that pieces have moved around
Yeah.
and
So you're
yeah.
probably talking, I mean, she's probably talking more about grounds for sculpture. So, like I said earlier, grounds for sculpture and the Seward Johnson Atelier are two different entities.
Okay.
The Seward Johnson Atelier does not acquire art. Um, we um, we have Seward's collection of artwork that we show throughout the country, throughout the world. Um, his curator, or our curator, Paula Stokey, has been with Seward since the very beginning. His first solo exhibition in 1980 in Washington, which that's really how like the ISC and Seward, like it was kind of intermingled there. Um,
Mhm.
so she travels work all over, like all over the world and all over the country. Um, so I'm sure you probably have seen, I mean, if you go anywhere, it's like anytime I go on vacation, I walk into a town and I see a Johnson artwork and I'm like, what? Like a Stuart
Wow.
Johnson. I'm like,
Yeah.
how is this possible? They follow me. Um, but I'm sorry, I got totally sidetracked.
It's all right. It's all right. I think a lot of
But
people
yeah,
are
so
still,
we're not, so we
yeah.
don't actually acquire artwork.
Okay.
Um, However, Grounds for Sculpture does have their own committee, and they could acquire artwork. I don't know if they're doing it right now, and I can't speak to what their organization's doing, but
Mhm.
they're the entity that would acquire artwork. So there's also at Grounds for Sculpture, there's a permanent collection, and some pieces are just because of the transfer agreement. There's artwork that does not move.
Wow.
However, they have the ability to move quite a few of the artwork. Um, they can travel that artwork. So, there's many different
Yeah.
um, It really
I think,
depends.
yeah. I think you answered some of our attendees' questions. I know some people had questions about
Okay.
the grounds for sculpture. I know it's not the same thing, and
Yeah. I was
about
like, I
just
can do my best, but it's
the
hard.
pieces. Yeah, yeah. Are there any sculptures of Seward's that he did not finish before he passed? Um,
So there's actually quite a few pieces that were just never realized. He would make maquettes of pieces and they were never enlarged. For one reason or another, maybe he just kind of lost interest, or he changed his mind. But there's a whole body of work that wasn't, unrealized maquettes that we have. So
yeah.
yeah, there's work that he was working on, um, right up to the end. But um, there's a new piece in the park that was installed in June. He didn't see it fully installed, but the piece was finished before he passed.
Oh,
So, we took the piece out before it was, finished being painted. We cited everything. He approved everything. He approved all the, colors for the piece. And then in June, we installed it. Um, but he never saw it installed and fully installed in its place. But the piece was finished in pieces, just not installed prior to him passing.
curious minds want to know what this piece is about and what it's called.
Um, it's an interesting piece. And for some reason, I'm blanking on the name right now, which is really irresponsible of me.
No worries. I'm bad with names too.
I was like, oh, it's called Viral Art. Sorry. I was like, I don't know how I blanked on that. So it was called Viral Art, and he named the piece. He died March 10th, so it was prior to COVID,
Ah,
and
wow.
so he named the piece Viral Art, and prior to that, but it was more about how the pieces interacted with one another. So, um, it's Monet, it's Seward. So you have the viewer, and there's a blank canvas painting the scene. And Seward painting Churchill, Churchill painting Manet, Manet painting Monet. Um, and then, so it's like this kind of viral experience.
Oh.
Um, and it's cited at Grounds, cited at Grounds for Sculpture, but at the by the rat side of Grounds for Sculpture. Um, and so that's it,
Wow.
viral art.
It's very timely. I feel
Yeah.
that about a Seward's art.
So that's the
Yeah.
interesting thing, is that we talk about this quite often, is that Seward had that Seward would come up with these ideas, and people would think he was a little bit, like different. And then, they would get his ideas would catch up with with the culture, um and we even said, like, we're like, how are we going to deal with the piece being called viral art during a global a global pandemic? But I mean, that's what he entitled it, and that's what it was going to be called. And we were scared that that was going to kind of make people feel uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Yeah. It seemed he liked to push boundaries, which is
Mhm.
wonderful. Ruth wants to know if there is a map that shows where all his pieces are located
Mm.
around the world. She seems to think there is somewhere. Is that correct?
Well, kind of, yes. So if you go to our website, there is a map that you can put it in your, it's not fully populated, but we're working on it. You can put in your address and see where pieces are. So it's like an interactive
Wonderful.
map on our website.
Wonderful. Tara wants to know if the lovely Mrs. Johnson, Seward Johnson, is still with us.
She is.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, she is. Um, the entire family is a gift to, um, I mean, just a gift in general, but definitely a gift to New Jersey. So um, they're just good people. I don't know what else to, I don't know what else to say about that.
You'll see in the comments, Lynn, that there are a lot of people with lovely memories of Seward,
I love that. That's so
and
nice. Thank you, everyone.
also comments about how accessible his art is. I mean, just the ability to have people interact with his art. And I'm sure many of us in the area have had pictures with Seward's sculptures and art, and just the joy that they bring to us. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. And sorry that I like rambled on, but
oh no, no worries.
It's definitely hard to do when you don't see people.
It's a new world. It's a new world. I usually imagine that I'm surrounded by a lot of people, but you know, they say to imagine people like in their underwear when you're nervous.
Yeah.
But that's assuming you have people to imagine in their underwear. But
at one point I was like, am I just talking to myself? I know all of this. I was like, am I even making sense? Like, this is,
yeah.
But it's okay. Anyway, I mean, Kim, if you're able to share with me any of the, you know, any of the chat, you know, any of the questions, I can also, you know, contact, like give you information that you're able to share with anybody. You know, I can give better answers probably to things if I think about it, or share links with you to the map or our website, or you know, other things happening, the Atelier and joint programs or grounds for sculpture.
Of course. All of you know my email by now. I send out all of our Zoom links through my work email, so I know many of you have my email. So if you would like to reach out to Lynn, please feel free to contact me. I will pass along your questions, your comments. This program is being recorded right now, so we also have your comments in the transcript. Okay. So I can pass along to you, Lynn. And and it's just been such a pleasure. And I've always wanted to know more about Seward Johnson and the Johnson family, just because it's the one place I've always taken all my family and friends who visit, who are from out of state. And we just always enjoy our time at the Grounds for Sculpture, and now knowing more about the Seward Johnson Atelier as well. For those of you who want to learn more about art, and who don't know, the library does have a monthly art educator who comes and speaks about different artists. Her name is Janet Mandel, and she is speaking to us next month about Augusta Savage, who is a sculptress. So if you want to learn more, we're soon going to post information about that program, and be sure to sign up for our email list, and we will send you notifications of our further programs. So I think that is it for me. I will send out a survey for everyone after this program. Lynn, thank you again.
Yeah,
Joyce,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, Joyce, I don't know if you have anything else to say. Joyce Cantalese, our sponsors from Robert Wood Johnson. Thank you so much. This has been such a marvelous conversation. And
just thank you, big thank you. So I feel just honored to be part of it. And Lynn, you did great. So genuine.
Oh, thank you.
Your presentation was so heartfelt that, you know, really felt the love that you felt for him and his work, and carrying that on. So just appreciate being part of it. Tara and Kim, thank you for having me and indulging me when I called and asked what we could do to kind of bring us all together. So thank you.
Oh, of course. And, you know, when you came to us with this idea, we were like thrilled, and we look forward to collaborating with you further. And Lynn, of course, you told us that you have many resources, artistic resources. So we may be reaching out to you as well. Everyone, have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, and see everyone soon on Zoom. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.